Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Football Pundits. Today, we've got a very special segment. Why special? Because we've got two special elements about it. Special element number one, the topic for today's segment, and it's none other than Fantasy Premier League. That's right. We're going to load today's episode with all the tips, all the strategies that you were not looking for. And here's the special element. Here's the second special element about today. We've got a very special guest on our show. It's none other than Karn Bawari, the gent who's sitting right below me. Don't get confused. Yes, there are two Karns on this show, Karn. Would you believe it? But why is Karn Bawari special? Let me tell you why. The gentleman below me has a team called Avivas. Am I right, Karn? And
That's right.
he is in the top 6% of all fantasy Premier League managers in the world. That means that out of the 7.5 million teams that have been created this season, our man ranks at 42,000, which is incredible. So today's show is going to be all about all the tips that you're looking for as we head in to the Premier League run-in. There's going to be a series of fixtures. For those of you who still have your wildcards, you lucky bums, you smart people, no wonder you're not languishing in the bottom 2 million like me. So without further ado, it gives me immense joy and pleasure to bring Karn Bawari on the show. And Karn, take it right away and tell us what's really worked for you this season and how the hell are you in this top 6% despite being a Chelsea fan?
Thanks for that intro, Abby. Great to be on the show, guys. I'm going to get straight at it. I think the few things that have worked for me this season, and they seem like standard tips, but boy, do they work. Number one, you've got to stick to the choices that you make, which means don't keep changing, right? The best performing players in FPL this season have been in my team from the get-go. Now we're talking about the likes of KDB, Salah, Trent, Ings and Vardy have got me a lot of points as well, as did Lord and Tammy at some point. So don't keep changing, right? Keep the faith. There are many chips available to you, one more this season than last. So don't necessarily have to play them, right? There was this big conundrum that I faced earlier saying, I have two wildcards this season. Do I want to go with both? Do I do it? Do I not? And actually, I didn't actually play my first wildcard till the absolute death of the first half of the season, which meant that when I started the second half of the season, I didn't need a wildcard, right? Which means now that wildcard is safe for me to use in the coming 8 game weeks, right? So I'm one of those lucky bums, Abby, that has a wildcard to go, right? That's number one. Number two, that goes, I think, with point one, is don't keep taking the minus points. I was very tempted last season. The season before that was my first season. And, I'd say, hey, I think I like this guy, so I'm going to go with him. And, you don't think a -4 hurts you, but a -4 definitely hurts you, right? Not in one game week maybe, but over the course of a few game weeks, when you're that close, it will hurt you. So don't take the minus points. Unless, of course, you're trying to recover from a very, very bottom position in your league and you need to do drastic things to come up, right? That's number two. I'd say number three would be go with your gut. And I know that there's lots of stats out there. There's lots of podcasts out there. There's lots of shows out there, including ours now in Football Pundits. But go with your gut. There's only that much stats can do. You've seen some players play while you're looking at other people's opinions of games that you've not really seen. So go with your gut, right? There's always going to be this head versus heart, which is sort of a conundrum for me right now, because as I choose my forward line, I'm thinking, should I go with Rashford or should I go with Tammy Abraham, right? Obviously, all the stats will say Rashford, but heart says Tammy. Let's see where Tammy leaves me at the end of this game week or the next few game weeks. And finally, nothing to do with me, but just, if you can get lucky along the way, right? Like a Harvey Barnes got me a whole host of points 2 or 3 game weeks before the lockdown, right? So I think keep the faith, take a few punts, and don't be afraid to experiment. That's what I'd say.
So I think he eventually said, don't listen to him. Eventually, Kern said, don't listen to him. Go with your gut. Don't basically ignore this episode.
Yeah.
Keeping in line, Bawari, with your hard hitters, you mentioned obviously the likes of Salah, KDB, Trent. A lot of the questions that currently all FPL managers will have is what to do with these guys, because Pep Roulette struck again this week. KDB had a brilliant first game in his double game week. Second one came off the bench, got only 1 point. Aguero played only one of the games, then got subbed off at halftime because of an injury.
Yeah.
Salah was on the bench. Obviously, neither Liverpool nor City have too much to play for after a couple of games. I'm wondering, like, are these the players who we want in our team anymore because they're really expensive for someone to just sit on the bench, or are they getting you so many points that you have to go for them?
So it's a tricky one, Karan, right? All of us have been in sort of debating that, especially when it comes to Man City and Pep, because he's always ruling, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And ruining our lives. I had a good game week this last week, but I had triple captain KDB, I had Sterling, and they did a great job in the first game week, or the first of the two game week games for them. But nothing in the second game, right? So, but what that does do is, as you're planning for the next game week, you know that both Sterling and KDB will start. They were both rested, and against Chelsea, they were playing fantastic football in the first game. So they've just sort of taken off from where they left off, and therefore it gives me heart to say that you can trust the City boys at least for the next week. So I think with City, you've got to go game week to game week. Liverpool's the trickier one, I think, because I'm saying Man City is not as tricky because the rotation will happen. You'd expect that the Robertsons and the Trents and the Salahs of the world will be in the Liverpool team, but of course that was a surprise in both Salah and Robertson. A lot of hearts were broken, but I think now, especially given the bump that happened because of the draw at the Merseyside derby, that Salah is gonna be back in the team, and Salah is going to score. The reason why they weren't looking so coherent going forward. Sorry. Yes.
I was just going to cut you there because I think a lot of fantasy managers like myself who have Aguero in their team, right? And before we move into what I believe are three critical components of building your team over the next, which Annie will highlight, I have Aguero in my team, and I'm sure a lot of fantasy managers have Aguero. He's pretty much out for the season, or you wouldn't want to waste 11 points of your team on Aguero. Who do you think is a reasonable replacement for a Kun Aguero? Would it be Gabriel Jesus himself because he's guaranteed a start now in the next 7 games? Or would you look at actually saving some points now to spend elsewhere?
I think the way to do this season is to load up on midfield, not so much your forwards. You've got much better, cheaper options out there. So we spoke about Jimenez when we were chatting just the other day. There's Vardy, and his 100th goal is up and coming. So that's a big milestone for him. There's Ings, who's been sort of discounted over the last couple of game weeks, and suddenly he's come in and scored a bunch of points. What's very interesting, by the way, is on the fixture difficulty rating, it's a grey for Southampton against Arsenal. It's going to become fairly commonplace for us to see now.
Yeah.
But who's to say he's not going to score against an Arsenal as well? And you've obviously got Dominic Calvert-Lewin as well. So I don't know. I think there are greater points to be had in Man City's midfield than the starting. The forward line.
Yeah, and like Abhishek mentioned earlier, that there are key components to build your team for the coming 8 games that are left, 8 game weeks, and it's a little more different than we've normally played FPL over like a decade, almost all of us, right? Key being that most teams, like you mentioned, when you consider Man City, you would still rather back those players from at least getting in goals and assists rather than go for differential options or too many differentials where those players might not end up playing back-to-back game weeks, right? So must-have players who should be in your squad for at least the next 2 or 3 game weeks for me would be the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, would be Mane, would be Salah. If you can, obviously not all 3 of them in the same team, it's very tough to accommodate them. I'll tell you why. Liverpool have to now go for it. Like you said, Kern, that when Salah and Robertson didn't play, it was a little surprising. That means the injuries were more serious than first thought because Liverpool have nothing else to play for. Just go broke, get the title, and then either go for the record for the most number of points or then sit still, right? So I would definitely take Salah or Mane in my team, Kevin De Bruyne for sure. Yeah. And I would probably take from Manchester United, I would take either Bruno Fernandes, and I would take one of the defenders. I don't know about Rashford only because he looks a little rusty to me. I think he can get in goals, but if I had a choice between a Vardy or a Rashford, I would keep Vardy along right now. Only because even when Leicester have had tough fixtures and back-to-back fixtures in the festive period, you would rather take a Vardy because like Kern said, he has always more to play for and motivates himself. But obviously Rashford's a cheaper option, so maybe you can take the punt and go for it. In terms of differentials, we've seen a Matt Ritchie this week. We spoke about Newcastle players last week as well, right?
They have a green zone, actually. The next 3 games are all green.
Yes, they do. So it'll be really good to take in a Lascelles if you can, a Fernandes like Abhishek and Kern mentioned, Rateria, not Babari. They're good differentials to have. And don't not look at Wolves. you can always go for a Patricio if you don't want to take a Henderson. You can always go for a Roman Says, who's only 4.5 like I have, and he's given me amazing returns. And Jimenez, I've had him. I've not taken him out for the last 15 game weeks. So I think that is essential. And I'm going to talk about my captain for this game week and then shoot it to y'all. My closing comment for my captain this would be that it's actually confusing this week. It's not as easy as I would have thought earlier. My gut tells me to go for a Manchester United player, right? And if you guys can't take in Bruno because you don't want to, then go for Pogba because he's 0.2 cheaper and a good differential. He only has 4% ownership or less than. So that's not bad.
Yeah.
I would stick with Bruno as captain for this game week for me. And if you're still a little worried, just go for Jimenez. I think he will get the goals for you. Versus, yeah. What about you guys? Captain picks?
Before captains, I want to pick both the Kerns on screen because they've been killing it this season. What's your take on the differential? So while Annie did mention that there are some teams that you should look at, if you were to actually pinpoint a few specifics, who would you look to bring in as differentials? Maybe Kern, Rateria, you can start and Pawari can finish.
My differential, I agree with Annie on the Newcastle bit. They got a clean sheet this week as well. Had Fernandes got me a good bonus point in as well. They have a good set of fixtures. I think people are really discounting Wolves. I mean, I mentioned this last week again, and I mentioned a name like Doherty. Yes, he's not a differential because of just the price tag that he comes with,
6.5,
but he got 12 points, guys. He got 12 points, guys, and that's just essential. And if you just see how good this Wolves team is, you see the fixtures coming up, you see they have everything to play for. It's what you want to. They're ticking every single box. As an FPL manager, I want to see a team. What are they playing for? What are the fixtures? Are they in form? They have everything. So if you want to go for a cheaper option, you have the Traore, who you can pick, who passed the eye test and how last week, even though he came off the bench. I think those would be my picks. I've said it last week. I'm saying it again. Wolves picks will get you points. And I'm going to then shoot this off to Bawari. Yeah, and ask him what he thinks.
So, Karan, Annie, bang on. I think Wolves' assets are not going anywhere. But I think the one team that we ought to look at now is Spurs and their assets. I think one big differential, and I keep getting surprised every single time that he is still a differential, is Son Heung-min. He's just, I think, 7% owned right now. He's 9.7 million, but he's a whole lot worth that 9.7 million.
Because of his
now
injury,
that, yes. No, but around he's been and thereabouts, Abby. He could easily talk about him being a 10, 11 million player, right? He's there and thereabouts, and he's still 7.1% owned as of right now.
There are other Spurs. You said Son. The other Spurs player, exactly. Dele Alli and Bergwijn was 7.4 and 8.3, right? Cheaper options.
Yes. No, I know. So I was coming to that. So if you can't afford Son, my next point was take Bergwijn, because he's obviously fit and firing again. And in the limited time that he's been here, he's obviously made an impact. And now with Harry Kane coming in and Spurs just generally a lot more solid with their injury players coming back, I think one of these guys will score. Even Lucas Moura, in fact, because he's been away, there's been injury, but he's going to come back in. So I think Spurs are critical, and they have a great fixture list, right? They start from West Ham, there's Sheffield United away, there's Everton, there's Bournemouth, and there's finally Arsenal. And you'd think earlier that the London derby is going to be a difficult fixture, but obviously it's Greys anymore, no longer red. So I would. In my team, I wish I could afford Son, but I can't. So I think that's the dilemma that I have. I'll have to go with Steve Bergwijn or Lucas Moura, because
what do you make of Spurs' defense? What do you make of Spurs' defense? So Aurier, Vertonghen. Do you think, given that Mourinho plays the low block and you can see a run of easy fixtures with clean sheets, do you think that's something worth investing in?
So I'm very tempted, to be honest, but I think you have cheaper options out there, right? There is a 4.3. We just spoke about Newcastle United. They have a great run of 3 fixtures. Jamal Lascelles is just 4.3, right? And there's Taylor from Burnley. So there's a bunch of these guys that are available at 4.3, because if you want to load your midfield, you need money coming in from both defense and the front line. So, and that's why. Otherwise, it's very tempting to have Aurier, because, if all his antics aside, he will give you those assist points, right? And if there is a clean sheet to be had, which is likely to be the case in 2 or 3 of these remaining game weeks at least, then you're getting quite a lot of bang for your buck. But it's just a matter of saving those 0.5, 0.6 million so that you can invest in the midfield.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree on that, Bawari. What's your captain pick for this week then? If you had to pick, who's your captain pick going to be? And if you had to pick a dream captain, may not be in your team, who's it going to be?
Very, very, very tricky. Okay, I'm going with Salah. I've just deputed him back in my team. I think what's been different is he wasn't around. Like I was saying, there was a blip or a bump, whatever you call it, because of the Merseyside derby. I think what you need to remember, you know what's happening, and this is the sense that I get. Everyone just playing up Man City, of course, because and teams that are 2, 3, 4, and 5, and saying, that's where you need to invest and look at. And it's okay to obviously have Trent because Liverpool are Liverpool. But what I really think is, guys, and I know I'm talking to 3 United fans, but Liverpool are at the brink of history. I know you don't like it, but it's been 30 years in the making. These guys, till a few weeks ago, thought that the title that they'd waited 30 years for was taken away from them. Now it's almost like, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, right? So they will come back, and they're playing Crystal Palace. And I know Crystal Palace have had a great run of the last 3 or 4 games where they've kept clean sheets, but it's not going to be easy with Crystal Palace, right? And you know what Salah missing can do to your front line. And him coming back, it's a punt, I know, but it's worth taking. So far, and I'm not saying I'm not going to change it. So far, it's Salah who has my armband.
Nice.
Abby, what about you?
Yeah, well, the only good thing that's happened to me this season is that I've had Nick Pope in my team from game week 1. So that's the only thing that's really worked for me, despite conceding 5 goals last time. But
Except for last night.
Except for last night, that's what. Despite conceding 5 goals last night, but I concur with what Bawari says, because I also took Salah off to bring in Raheem Sterling last minute into this double game week, and luckily it paid off because he got me 10 points in the first game against Arsenal. But yeah, I'm also looking. So I'm gonna not do what Bawari says, which is to have both City players going into this. I'm gonna actually take Sterling off and bring Salah back to captain him against Palace. I see a 5-0, 4-0 kind of scoreline.
All right, so I think that's Salah and Bruno seem to be the popular captain picks. Last week I had said for a differential captain, if you want to go against an Aguero, go for a Henderson. And as it happens, Henderson scored a lot more than Aguero. And I would say if you want to go for a differential captain pick again this week to just make up those points in the mini leagues and go above people who are above you, go for a Jimenez. He's playing Bournemouth. Wolves are in good form. I think he's gonna get those goals. So if you want a differential captain, everyone's gonna go for Salah. Maybe look out for a Jimenez.
That was perfect. Yeah. Thank you both the Kerns for your expertise tips. Hopefully you'll win your mini leagues that you're part of. Abhishek, for the likes of you and me, we have to just hope and pray that people around us start messing up. Guys, don't forget the deadline is 9:30 IST tonight. Don't forget to hit subscribe. You can hit us up on Twitter. We had even Kern Bawari's handle. He's the expert. You can go bug him. I'll also put in his personal WhatsApp and email ID. Please go for it. Unlike the other Kern, he's not very pricey. We hope to see you guys in the next episode. Have a good one.
Cheers.